أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers of Imam Hussein TV, and welcome to another episode of the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Today we analyze one of the most tactical and beautiful battles in the Islamic history, the Battle of Khaybar, in which some of the most famous occurrences of Amir al-Mu'mineen and Rasulullah took place against the Jews. Assalamu alaikum to our guest and our honorary speaker, Sayyid Ali. How are you keeping?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always an honor to have you.
Thank you. The honor is mine.
So to start off with, we've looked at some of the Jews and their tribes already in the previous episodes. And we've also looked at some of the battles that have occurred and how the Jews were sort of intercalated with the prior battles. But this is sort of one of the first outright battles against the Yahud in terms of one of the major battles, because this was a famous fort. So I wanted to ask, firstly, what is Khaybar and what led to this occurrence of the Muslimin even reaching the point of the Battle of Khaybar?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أبد العابدين. After the expulsion and the banishment of the tribe of Bani Nadir,
Yes.
Some of them moved away from Arabia and some of them retreated to the land of Khaybar. And we'll come to explain after this introduction what Khaybar is. So after Bani Nadir being expelled from Medina, they were the community who lived in the vicinity of the holy city of Medina. And then the event of the conquest or the battle of Ahzab, i.e. Khandaq, the trench, took place. And again, the Jews of Bani Qurayza were this time the individuals who were playing a very treacherous role against the Muslims and against Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then, after the event of Ahzab and the pagans putting their hands in the hands of the Jews, and the hypocrites, the munafiqeen of Medina, all standing in one line against the Muslims, and the Muslims becoming victorious in that battle, where Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi stood in front of the army of the mushrikeen and fought bravely and annihilated the leader of the mushrikeen, Amr ibn Abd al-Amiri. The Muslims became victorious, and this diminished the strength of Quraysh and the Jews collectively. Here, in the months of Dhul Qa'dah or Dhul Hijjah, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the 6th towards the 7th year after Hijrah, he planned to take the Muslims towards Mecca to perform the religious ritual, where after losing the battles, the consecutive battles against Rasulullah, Quraysh decided to sign a peace treaty with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they signed this treaty, agreeing on terms, one of them being that the Muslims would not enter Mecca this year. They would go back to Medina, and this would give the time of 10 years of peace between the Muslims and Quraysh, that they do not engage in any confrontation. They do not try to establish a kind of a battle with Quraysh, and Quraysh wouldn't do the same. They won't attack the Muslims will not attack the tribes or the caravans. So a kind of a peace treaty which happened in the area of Hudaybiyah. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a tent met with the representing party from Quraysh, and Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was the one that was writing the peace treaty. And there is a specific story, and inshallah the brothers and sisters will be able to research and read about this treaty. So the Muslims, as a result, as a conclusion to that treaty, they felt that they didn't receive, the benefits were towards the Quraysh.
Okay.
Muslims didn't receive any benefits because
Sure.
they wanted to enter Mecca to perform their religious obligations, their religious rituals, to meet the Muhajirin wanted to meet their family members, to take some of their belongings back. So they came back to Medina without gaining anything.
Fair enough.
Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, as it was revealed to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that after or behind what is going to happen behind or after this treaty was going to be more beneficial to the Muslims rather than them going into Mecca and going back to Medina after, because they couldn't stay in Medina. This wasn't a conquest. This wasn't something like the Muslims were entering Mecca to take over Mecca as it happened afterwards. This was just merely going in there for 3 or 4 days, performing their religious acts and going back to Medina. So what happened when Rasulullah returned to Medina, they say in the early days of Muharram, soon after Rasulullah knew that the Jews who he banished from Medina, Banu Nadir, Banu Qurayza, they retreated to Khaybar. Khaybar in those days was a stronghold for the Jews because it had many fortresses. As we come to explain how many fortresses there were more than 8 fortresses there.
Wow.
Of course, each different to another in terms of size and position and geographical position in Khaybar.
Yeah.
Because Khaybar is not only one, because when we say Khaybar, there are some of the brothers and sisters who think that Khaybar is a name of one fortress.
Okay.
Khaybar is a plot of land.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a village,
Yeah.
which is very fertile,
Okay.
which has got abundant amounts of water, very, very wealthy in terms of agriculture, many farms, many orchards, many gardens. Some historians narrate that there was more than 40,000 palm dates there.
Wow.
And the fortress is made of stones.
Okay.
And
Strength.
so which made that it was a stronghold. It was a safe haven for the Jews of Bani Qurayza and Bani Nadir to retreat and save themselves from the wrath of the Muslims.
Interesting.
So it's an area north of the city of Medina.
Okay.
The distance between Medina and Khaybar, the village of Khaybar, or the area of Khaybar, is somewhere between 160 to 170 kilometers.
Wow. Okay.
So it's not very close, and it's not a very far distance from the city of Medina, and it's on the main road towards Tabuk and Sham. All the caravans that want to go towards Sham, they have to pass Khaybar.
Good trading route as well.
A good trading route.
I see.
So not only the Jews of Khaybar were in a very fertile area, making use of the water and the date palms there, and the very fertile agriculture, which was very economical, very financial, a financial stability for them. But also they were on the route of the caravans going towards Sham.
I see.
I.e. the caravans of Quraysh headed by Abu Sufyan and whatsoever. So here, the population narrated in the books of history is not very precise, but at the same time there is a rough figure of somewhere between 10,000 to an extent of 20,000 inhabitants of Khaybar, being men, women, farmers, elders, and soldiers, armed men. So having these fortresses, you would need an army. You would need to protect, because previously, as we described in history, the Romans had attacked the Jews when they were in the area of Sham or Jerusalem. So here, when the Jews migrated from that part of the world, from the Middle East, and came towards Arabia, they wanted to establish a new defense system, a defense mechanism for themselves.
Okay.
So to stop them from being attacked by anyone. And now exactly at this point, they wanted to save themselves from the Muslims and the new Islamic, the new evolving Islamic government and community. So this is why it was important for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, soon after coming back from Hudaybiyah to the holy city of Medina, to quickly make a move towards Khaybar. Why? And this is why the whole event of the conquest or the Battle of Khaybar started.
I see.
Because the Jews, after a year of being expulted and after a while from Ghazwat al-Ahzab, they couldn't stand remaining there because they knew that Rasulullah was going to come after them. Because they weren't going to just sit there. They've lost their land in Medina, they lost their palm trees, their agriculture, their lifestyles, their merchandise, their well-being. Economically, they were drained. So they went and started exactly after a year, in the year 6 after the Hijrah, while Rasulullah was occupied with going towards Mecca and doing Sulh al-Hudaybiyah. The Jews were doing what? They were sending representatives to Mecca to sit down and convince Quraysh once again to come and help and support the Jews of Khaybar this time to annihilate Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's as if Ahzab wasn't enough for them. It's as if they didn't learn from the lessons of Ahzab.
Yeah.
So upon finding out Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because Rasulullah, he established the government, and in every government there are eyes that Rasulullah has to send his companions to bring him news. News of what? News of the clans and tribes in Arabia and how they are living life. Because Rasulullah used to send expeditions not only to conquer or to defend the Muslims from an apparent attack, but also to propagate the Islamic teachings.
I see.
Because Rasulullah in those years, he sent messengers towards the 6 or the 3 different nations around Arabia, the Romans, the Persians, and the Egyptians, inviting its leaders towards Islam. So this was a normal practice for Rasulullah. When he sent messengers to different parts of Arabia, when they used to come back, they used to give news of the number of the clans and tribes, their population, how they are living life, what they are doing with their daily chores. So Rasulullah had a good idea of what's happening around the city of Medina. In the 6th year after Hijrah, one of the expeditions, they arrest one of the Arabians, which was taking an invitation from one of the local tribes towards the Jews of Khaybar, saying to them that we will provide you with armed men as long as you give us the rewards of Khaybar. You know, everyone has had their eyes on Khaybar.
I see.
And the agricultural benefits and profits of Khaybar. You know, 40,000 palm trees, which was well known to be producing the best of dates in those days.
I think to put it into context for the viewers as well, palm trees was one of the main sources of income.
Of course.
Other than, there's the gold, there's the, day-to-day wheat and stuff, but dates were a luxury of a sort in a sense because of its rareness to grow, what was required to grow it, the type of land. So around the world, there was this need that, oh wow, dates from Medina, dates from
and in those days, the people that controlled those parts of Medina or Arabia, because mainly palm trees were in Medina.
I see, okay.
Because of its nature, the land and the fertility of the land, you wouldn't find similar fertility in Mecca, because Mecca was an open desert land.
Yeah, okay.
I.e. in the story of Prophet Ibrahim, when he says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, إِنِّي أَسْكَنْتُ مِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِ بِوَادٍ غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ, which means that, oh Allah, I have brought my family and my offspring to live in an area of the world where it's a desert land.
Yeah,
there is
barren
no
land,
vegetation. It's barren. But Medina was different. And nowadays, if you go to
Yeah,
Medina,
of course.
you would see how nature-wise,
Yeah,
how the holy city of Medina tends to be cooler and calmer
100%.
than the city of Mecca. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the visitation
Ilahi,
of the
Ameen.
city of Medina very
Ilahi,
soon.
Ameen, Ilahi, Ameen, many more times.
This is very fascinating when people go these days to the city of Medina and their caravan or their group takes them around the city
Yeah.
of Medina, to the Masajid al-Sab'a, to
Yeah,
different land, and to show them this is where Rasulullah was, this is where the Muslims came, this is where they prayed. Masajid al-Sab'a
yeah,
is one of the locations in an Ahzab, the event of Ahzab.
Yeah.
There were different locations that Rasulullah used to move from one area to another.
Yeah.
And these locations became mosques.
Wow.
For example, one of the mosques is Masjid Salman.
Yeah.
Salman was there.
Yeah.
He was in charge of that area of land in Ahzab. So Rasulullah placed him there. So Salman used to pray. This is Masjid Salman.
Wow.
Or Masjid Fatimah al Zahra Salamullahi Ala. This is where Fatimah al Zahra was in the event of Ahzab. Masjid Rasulullah, the different locations where Rasulullah used to pray. So these areas are very sacred. Why do we like the city of Medina? Because it was the sacred land where Ahlul Bayt and Rasulullah used to live. Amir al Mu'mineen, he became the carrier of the banner of Islam in certain locations there. Anyway, so we said Khaybar was a very important strategical area. The Jews of Qurayza and Nadir were, joining the Jews of Khaybar. And being Jews, they all cooperated with each other to attack or to organize a front against the Muslim Ummah. So it was a hotbed, it was a stronghold for the plotting of conspiracies and treachery against Rasulullah, mainly Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, and Ali ibn Abi Talib sallallahu alayhi, because of the defeat that they faced on the hands of Ali ibn Abi Talib in the previous battles.
Of course, understandable.
Because Rasulullah used to send Ali ibn Abi Talib to Bani Nadir. Rasulullah used to send Ali ibn Abi Talib with his companions to Bani Qurayza. Amir al Mu'mineen defeated them in Ahzab. In Uhud, Amir al Mu'mineen defeated Quraysh. In Badr, Amir al Mu'mineen defeated Quraysh. So here they were behind or after these two individuals mainly, Rasulullah and Amir al Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. So this is the gist of what Khaybar is and how Khaybar was a point or an interesting area where Rasulullah concentrated in attacking or defending the Muslims from the conspiracies of the inhabitants of Khaybar.
Ahsan. So now that we've sort of established the formalities of Khaybar itself, I wanted to ask, surrounding the battle, because obviously, like you said, many people confuse the fact that the battle it was on a piece of land, and it's not just the Battle of Khaybar because it's one fortress.
Yes.
So if you could discuss with us two things. Number one, what were the number of Muslimin in the army and how many did the opposition have? And secondly, in terms of the strategic movement and the overall inhabitancy of the battle, what sort of occurred, if you don't mind going into that?
Now, I have noted, I usually try to rely on my research, on my memory, on some of the facts, but this battle consists of many facts that I wanted to transfer these facts as they are in numbers and in description to my brothers and sisters. The Muslims were somewhere between 14 to 1600 individuals.
Okay.
14 to 1600 soldiers. That many of them were with Rasulullah in the signing of the peace treaty of Hudaybiyah. So they've just come back to Medina. Rasulullah spoke to them and said, now that we are back in Medina, we have a very important objective and we all go towards Khaybar. So Rasulullah took the majority plus more of the Muslims towards Khaybar. Of course, we said the inhabitants of Khaybar, they were somewhere between 10 to 20,000. Not all of them were soldiers. Now the soldiers in different fortresses conspired of somewhere between 500 to 1,000 to 4,000.
Wow.
But the rest of the inhabitants were women men and normal, elders and children. So if we can totally, let's say the soldiers that stood against the Muslims in Khaybar were somewhere around 10,000 soldiers.
Okay.
So it was somewhere between 1.5 against 10 for each person.
Yeah.
Here, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanted to know what Khaybar is, how Khaybar was made up of. So he sent different saraya, different expeditions to bring him and also seek help from those Arabians who were from the inhabitants of the surroundings of Khaybar. And that's why Rasulullah had people from the inhabitants of that area leading the way
I see.
towards Khaybar, to different locations of Khaybar.
So there were some, even in these areas, who sort of had loyalty to Rasulullah.
Yes, of course there were a number of the Jews that remained in Medina that sided with Rasulullah, that joined with him from Medina towards Khaybar.
Very nice.
So they were with him, not only the Muslims. There were some Jews who were loyal to Rasulullah and they joined with him, and they played a very prominent role in trying to convince the Jews of Khaybar to come down and agree with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to what they declined their offer. So there was a tribe called Bani Sa'd, and Bani Sa'd, as I said, they tried to make this agreement with Khaybar that we give you armed men and you give us the outcome of the financial year of Khaybar, which then Amir al-Mu'mineen arrested that messenger and was able to get him to confess what was happening.
Yeah.
And then through that, Amir al-Mu'mineen was able to send, he said, that person that confessed said that there's 200 armed men waiting in that specific area, who are going to attack. So Amir al-Mu'mineen again sent and was able to seize their belongings and seize their animal.
Wow, okay.
Because they were plotting something against the Muslims.
Of course.
And they confessed to that.
Yeah.
Let's go and describe what made land of Khaybar.
Okay, so the fortresses.
The fortresses.
Okay.
Khaybar was divided, if we can divide Khaybar into two different areas.
Mm-hmm.
The first area has 5 fortresses. This first area, which has 5 fortresses, is divided into 2. There is one area called An-Natat, which has 3 of the strongholds, and I will name the fortresses. The first being Husnu Na'im. Husnu Na'im is the first fortress that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam confronted.
Okay.
In that area called An-Natat. Of course, when we try to picture the area of Khaybar, we said if you go out of the city of Medina and you go north, you will be met with Khaybar. Khaybar facing, their fortresses were facing Medina. Okay. Why? Because from behind, Khaybar was in a rocky, mountainous area.
So you had the mountains.
It was between valleys.
I see.
And in the valleys, they had their palm trees. And in the mountainous areas, they built their fortresses.
Very nice.
And from behind, they supported themselves with the fact that there were mountains and the rocks.
Mm-hmm.
So they were expecting that the Muslims were going to attack or come towards Khaybar from the front, from the side of Medina.
I see.
But what Rasulullah ﷺ done was he came and he turned around the fortresses of Khaybar.
Yeah.
And came from the mountainous areas.
Oh wow.
The least that they expected.
Yeah.
They said, okay, the Muslims, they don't have that expertise, because usually when the Muslims wanted to engage in battle, it was a battle that they were facing their enemy. It was a one-to-one.
Yeah.
It wasn't in a way where they were attacking fortresses. They don't have the experience. So what the Jews of Khaybar used to think was that Rasulullah is going to attack us from the front,
mm-hmm.
and how they had protected themselves was that they used to dig trenches, as Rasulullah dug trench with the advice of Salman in Ahzab, they had also dug trenches or in the front area of their fortresses.
Wow, okay.
So if you imagine there was a fortress coming from the front, and there was one area
Which is the massive
that they open, for example, a door or a drawbridge,
Yeah.
that they are able to enter.
Like a moat, basically.
Ahsant.
Yeah, okay.
So every stronghold or every fortress had a kind of a fortress, and the fortress was as a result of the size. The depth and the length and the width of the fortress was as a result of the size of the actual fortress. Some fortresses were small, so they used to dig a small fortress. But some fortresses were huge, were humongous. So they used to dig a wider, a longer fortress around it. So that's why the Muslims found some fortresses to be easy to open and conquer, and some were difficult, as we'll come to very quickly explain. So we said, if we divide Khaybar into two different areas, one area being called the area of Natat, which had three fortresses: Hisn Na'im, Hisn al-Sa'b, which was named after al-Sa'b ibn Ma'ad, Hisn Qal'at al-Zubayr, or called al-Qalla. These are the three in this area called al-Natat. Another area, the first area, which we divided Khaybar into two. The first, we are still talking about the first location, is called al-Bashiq or al-Sharq.
Okay.
And this had two fortresses, Hisn Ubay, and the other one Hisn Nazar or al-Barid. So these are the five fortresses in that in the first location. In the second location, known by the location, the area of Al-Katiba, it had three. So the first location had five. The second location had three fortresses by the name of Al-Qamus, Al-Watih, and Al-Salalim or Al-Salalim. These are again three very important fortresses. Now, there was if we remember from the episode of Al-Ahzab, one of the pagan tribes that supported the Jews and the pagans of Quraysh were Bani Ghatafan. Bani Ghatafan, they pledged to support the Jews of Khaybar with 4,000 armed men.
Wow.
And Khaybar would give them the outcome, the financial, economical outcome of 1 year of the sale of the dates and the wheat and the barley.
Okay, fair enough.
So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam sent a messenger to Uyayna ibn Hassan, which was the leader of Bani Ghatafan, who some historians say they actually did manage to get into Khaybar.
Oh wow.
They went, they left their tribes, they headed towards Khaybar, and they were there when Rasulullah came.
Okay.
So in Khaybar, it wasn't only the Jews, it was some of the Arabs there who had signed peace treaties with the Jews. They were there too, and they wanted, you see, some of them weren't interested, although they were defeated in Ahzab, but they were more interested in gaining financial gains rather than engaging in a war, in a battle, knowing that in that army is Ali ibn Abi Talib, who kills the brave, valiant warriors of...
See, the Jews seem smarter than Quraysh already.
Ahsantu. So here, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used to come, engage in a siege. This is how it used to start. Some narrators or historians come and narrate that the whole of the battle in Khandaq from the beginning until the end took 1 month.
Wow.
Rasulullah entered in Muharram and exited and left after the conquest of Khaybar in Safar, which was roughly around 1 month or 1 month and a bit. But some historians come and say no, because it was a well-established area, it took months for the army of the Muslims to be able to open and conquer the area of Khaybar. And the Jews, that were still in Medina, not the ones that were in the army of Rasulullah. There were still some Jews who were sending strategical information about the army of Rasulullah to the Jews of Khaybar, saying to them that this army consists of 1,400 or 1,500 men, and you are 10,000. There is no way that the Muslims are going to be able to defeat you. And Quraysh were also looking at this event very carefully, because they also wanted to see what is the outcome. And they had placed bets, they were betting each other that the Muslims are going to be defeated this time. Not knowing that this messenger who is leading this army is being supported by the heavens, by the skies. Anyway, so they come cutting. The event of Khaybar is very detailed, so I don't want to take as much time as the show has given us, but I want to explain and give an idea and paint a picture for the viewers of what made this a long battle. The fact that there were trenches, and the fact that there were many fortresses. It wasn't one fortress, or it wasn't one location. So Rasulullah had to move from one location to another after conquering. So the first, which is in the area of Al-Natat, which consisted of 5 fortresses, Rasulullah aimed to conquer these first. Rasulullah used to, as I said, there was a siege placed by Rasulullah, cutting the help and the support that used to come to these fortresses, because one of these fortresses, by the name of Al-Husn Al-Sa'ab, or Sa'ab ibn Ma'ad, acted as a storage or as a warehouse where they used to store their dates, their oil, their ghee, their wheat and barley, and through that fortress they used to distribute it between the other fortresses.
Okay.
So there was only, for example, 500 soldiers in that area, because it was just a storage. So after a long while, the Muslims became tired and they were growing hungry. Their food supply was being emptied quickly. So Rasulullah said, go and try to break into that fortress, because all their supplies is in that. One way we can feed our soldiers, our army, and the other we can stop this fortress from supplying food to the other fortresses, because these fortresses were designed in a way where there was a main entrance towards the front, and there was a secret passage to every fortress,
like a tunnel system.
Just in case something happens, they are able to flee from one fortress to another. And this is what used to happen.
Yeah, of course.
And in these battles, they used to, after noticing that the Muslims were going to enter any of the fortresses, they used to quickly run
to the next one
through the secret passage.
Very nice.
That's why Marhab,
at
the beginning he was showing himself in one of the fortresses, and then later on he was able to retreat
to another one,
to the main fortress, which we will come to explain. Here, Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, after conquering these 5 fortresses,
okay, very nice,
Rasulullah kept Amir al-Mu'mineen and his companions. He told them, you take care of this area. We've opened this area just in case there is a plot or there is some assistance going to come from these areas. I want you to stay here. And Rasulullah took the other half of the army to conquer the rest of the fortresses, which were only 3 left. But one of the most difficult fortresses, and the one that very famously Amir al-Mu'mineen went and took the door, remained unconquered. But where is Amir al-Mu'mineen?
He's in
the first
area.
location. Rasulullah and the rest of the armies, they go to the second area called Al-Katiba. Husn al-Qamus, that's the name of the fortress that we want to concentrate in this very short time that we have. Husn al-Qamus was the strongest of the fortresses. It had 4,000 soldiers inside.
Wow.
It had the widest and the longest trenches around it. And it took more than 20 days of siege
Subhanallah.
for the Muslims to be able to conquer. Why? Why did it take 20 days? It took 20 days because the Jews weren't brave enough to come out and face the Muslims.
Okay.
All they were doing was shouting from the top of their fortresses, "Where are you? Come and fight us." And there are trenches. They know the Muslims won't be able to cross these trenches. The doors are closed. All they're doing was pelting the Muslims with stones, throwing shots of fire on them, and arrows. So Rasulullah every day was sending a group of the Muslims headed by the so-called companions, the leaders.
Yeah.
One day he would send Zubayr ibn al-Awwam. He would send him. He says, go and conquer this fortress. After a while, after hours, he would come back. The riwayah says, يُجَبِّنُهُمْ وَيُجَبِّنُونَهُ. He would scold them. He would speak against them, and they would speak against their leader. He would say, what's wrong with you? Why are you so weak? And they would say, you are weak. The next day, he would send Talha. Talha the same. He would go and come back defeated. The next day, he would send another individual from the Ansar, Sa'd ibn Ubadah.
Okay.
Again, he wasn't able to do anything. The next day, this took days.
Yeah.
Rasulullah every day sending one group of the army to go and conquer. The next day he would send, for example, Abu Bakr. He would go. Unable to do anything,
Return.
they will come back with either some of his companions wounded or killed. Umar ibn al-Khattab, he headed a group. Rasulullah sent him. He came back very quickly. The riwayah says, يُجَبِّنُهُمْ وَيُجَبِّنُونَ. He would say, you are lazy, you are chickens, you are not brave enough, and they would say, you are the one which is going to make the Islamic army defeated.
So everyone basically said that it's a verbal match so far.
Ahsantum.
Yeah.
And none of them were experienced in the art of war.
Yeah.
They used to say, we are the ones, but when really they used to go to the battlefield,
Nothing would happen.
nothing would happen. They will come back defeated.
Interesting.
Amir al-Mu'mineen still in the first area, which was 1 kilometer or so far from where Rasulullah was, and that stronghold. Rasulullah was very angry every time they used to come back defeated, because morally this was demoralizing the Islamic army, and the Jews were becoming more stronger, more fierce.
Yeah.
Because Rasulullah was sending groups of the Muslims. The army was going, they were either wounding or killing some of the Muslims. Until one night, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam said, لَأُعْطِيَنَّ الرَّايَةَ غَدًا رَجُلٌ يُحِبُّ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَيُحِبُّهُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ كرار غير فرار وَيَفْتَحُ اللَّهُ عَلَى يَدَيْهِ.
Subhanallah.
By Allah, tomorrow I shall give the banner of Islam to an individual who loves Allah and His Prophet, and whom is loved by Allah and His Prophet. He goes to the battlefield and he doesn't look back. Karrar ghair farrar. He doesn't run away from the battlefield. And surely Allah will open and conquer the rest of the fortresses on his hand. Now all the heads of the companions were turning left and right. Who is this person? Each one saying, coming to Rasulullah, Talha, Zubayr, Umar, Abu Bakr, Sa'd ibn Ubadah, coming to Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, give me the banner. I want to be that one. Rasulullah used to tell them, go away. I don't want to see you. You've had your chance, your opportunity. Next day, after Salat al-Subh, Rasulullah prayed congregational prayers with his companions. After prayers, he said, where is Ali? The Rasulullah knows that he left Ali, but he wants to explain it to people. Bring me Ali. The narrations narrate, he sent Salman and Abu Dhar. He said, go and bring me Ali. The narrations narrate that they came, each one on the side of Ali. They were dragging Ali ibn Abi Talib towards Rasulullah. Why? Because he had conjunctivitis. He had a problem with his eye, an eye rash or an eye problem. كان في عينه رمد. He wasn't able to see. Quraysh was saying that army that Ali ibn Abi Talib is in, and he is ill, he can't even see in front of his feet, that army is going to break. Rasulullah came, they brought Ali ibn Abi Talib. He saw Ali ibn Abi Talib. He said, Ali, what's wrong with you? Ali ibn Abi Talib said, Ya Rasul, I can't see. Rasulullah said, why? There was nothing wrong with Ali ibn Abi Talib when Rasulullah left him in the other parts of Khaybar. Amir al-Mu'mineen said, Ya Rasulullah, after you left, my heart started beating for you.
Allah.
So this caused this ramad. Rasulullah said, Ali, sleep. He placed his head on his lap, took some of his holy saliva, started wiping on the eyes of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ali ibn Abi Talib opened his eyes in the face of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. And Rasulullah said, Ali, stand. Ali ibn Abi Talib stood. Rasulullah gave him his armor. He put his turban on his head. He gave the banner, which was a white flag. He gave Dhul Fiqar to Ali ibn Abi Talib and he said, Ya Ali, charge towards the Khaybar.
Allah.
Amir al-Mu'mineen, as he was charging towards Khaybar, he didn't look back. He said, Ya Rasulullah, what am I fighting these guys for? Rasulullah said, go to them, admonish them, invite them towards Islam. If they disagree or disobey, tell them, okay, don't become Muslims, sign an agreement with us. This shows the peace that Islam was looking for.
Yeah.
And even on the battlefield, they used to invite and encourage the enemy to come towards Islam and sign a peace treaty. And if they disobey, fight them, Ya Ali. Amir al-Mu'mineen came. Amir al-Mu'mineen running, not on his horse, running on the battlefield. The Muslims, Jabir ibn Abdullah says, we called Sa'd ibn Waqqas, ibn Abi Waqqas, says, we used to shout, Ya Ali, wait for us. Let us wear our armor so we can come and help you. Amir al-Mu'mineen was charging towards, and these guys were still in the tents wearing their armors. So Amir al-Mu'mineen was all alone. These guys, they were pelting Amir al-Mu'mineen from the top of the fortresses. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he needed a big shield. By one of the there was a very small side entrance, there was a metal door, which was the height of a man or a bit higher. Amir al-Mu'mineen took out that door, used it as a shield, and started charging towards Marhab, knowing that no Muslim was going to be able to cross the trench, was standing there. He saw Ali ibn Abi Talib come. He said, who are you? Ali ibn Abi Talib said, who are you? Marhab started reciting, أنا الذي تعرف خيبر مرحبا. I am the one that Khaybar knows me as Marhab. Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah wa salamu alayhi says, أنا الذي سمتني أمي حيدر.
Allah.
I am the one that my mother called me Haydar. Marhab was told by his sister that, oh Marhab, you are going to be killed by someone named Haydar. So be careful. Marhab saw this. He started engaging in a battle one by one. They exchanged 2 strikes each. On the second strike, Marhab was wearing a helmet carved out of stone and an armor. So Amir al-Mu'mineen, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, hits Marhab on his head, breaking the helmet, the stone. The narrations narrate that the sword came down until it reached his jaw. Other narrations narrate that it came down and cut him in half. Seeing this, there were 6 or 7 other brave warriors in Khaybar. When they saw Marhab fall, they came fighting Amir al-Mu'mineen, Yasir, Amir, there were other well-known warriors. Amir al-Mu'mineen annihilated them all. The rest of the army, of the mushrik, of the Yahud, the Jews, they ran into the fortress. They closed the door. Amir al-Mu'mineen, shielding himself from the pelted stones and fire and the arrows, he goes towards the main gate of Khaybar. He places his hand inside the handle, the ring on the door of the fortress. And later on he comes to write to one of his companions that the way that I was able to shake the gates of Khaybar wasn't by physical power. It was by heavenly power given to me by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The women one of the wives of Rasulullah, Salama, if I'm not mistaken, was in the camp of Rasulullah on the other side of the trench. He said, when Ali ibn Abi Talib struck Marhab on the head, the valley around Khaybar started roaring with the shout of Khaybar as a result of the pain. That's when we knew that Ali ibn Abi Talib was next to the gates. Amir al-Mu'minin says, I took the handle of the gates of Khaybar. I started shaking it in a way that the inhabitants of Khaybar, the women and the children, felt that the whole of the fortress was being shaken, going through an earthquake. Amir al-Mu'minin, with a pull, he pulls the door, he throws it 10 feet down, he enters Khaybar alone. The army's on the other side. He enters, he kills a few number. All of them, they start scattering, not knowing what to do, save their lives. The Muslims are still waiting on the other side of the trench. Amir al-Mu'minin, after killing a number of them, comes back, takes the door, makes it a bridge, places it on top of the trench. The Muslims come in, they see, wow, what's left for us? The enemy is scattered. There are people that have been killed on the floor. All the rest of the Muslims done was go and start taking the booties of the war. And this is where Jibreel, again, it is narrated that here in this situation calls out, La fata illa Ali, La sayfa illa dhul fiqar.
Subhanallah, subhanallah. Ahsan Sayyid, honestly, what a beautiful story. And the way you've depicted Khaybar, a lot of people may not have known how the land itself was built, and the significance of why it's such a beautiful story is how Amir al-Mu'minin was left behind. And then Rasulullah shows the importance of Amir al-Mu'minin by calling him back. So, ahsan.
Of course, there are many more details of the event of Khaybar, but unfortunately, time-wise, we don't have enough time. Inshallah, we are given an opportunity to serve you in other episodes. Inshallah.
Thank you so much, Sayyid Ali, for joining us this week. And again, to our viewers, we are honored every week with your presence. Please do take care of yourselves. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.